Guys, it's been a while. So guys, welcome back to Compolis, the world of chameleons. So yeah, it's been a while, about 4 months or something. And I'm sorry that this episode took longer than it did to make. Also, my voice might sound a little different. I've got like a cold and stuff, so it's not like the best thing to have during the summer, but it's fine. So we're back with Compolis, the world of chameleons. This was supposed to, come out on my birthday, but I just couldn't get it out. I didn't have enough slides, and I wanted to add into more detail about other creatures and stuff. So I didn't really have time to get it out on my birthday. But it's coming out today, and I'm pretty happy for that. Right now, it's really hot where I'm at, inside and outside, and it's awful, but I'm still getting this out, even though I'm like sweating. And I worked a lot. I stayed up till about 6 o'clock one day working on it. Don't ask me why. And that makes me kind of tired, like I've got eye bags. And one day, my mom asked me, what are you always doing up so late? Doing stuff. Like, you got something to hide? And I looked her dead in the eye, and I said, I'm just doing some stuff. I don't know why I didn't actually say what I was doing. So my mom probably thinks I'm like weird now. I mean, she probably already thought that. But she'll definitely think it now. Maybe I shouldn't go over that, but we're gonna be talking about Compolis, specifically parts of Tungulus and Strills. So yeah, it's gonna be a little bit. So I don't know why I keep doing that, but okay. So we're gonna do Strills and North Tungulus. We might cover South Tungulus soon, but okay, so episode 9 is going to be about the main oceans and the islands. Oh, and the new island that is above the lagoon is now called Exrilis. So we have that. And also, the meteorite caused a little bit more ash. I didn't cover this in episode 7, but it caused ash to go up in the higher atmosphere, which caused the sun to not get through for a couple days, which caused significant freezing, which caused the temperate forests to grow as many tropical forests starts to die. This is about a couple thousand years after episode 7, and the ice caps have grown, especially the South Pole. South Pole is getting ready to connect with South Tungulus, so maybe some of the creatures will cross over. Just saying. And also, the Sirtha era is over. The Sirtha era ended right after the landing star hit. We are now in the Parsa era. The Parsa era is going to be the longest era. Also, kind of a foreshadowing thing I'm getting ready to happen. The reason why it's a chameleon skull is because something is going to happen. Now I'm gonna keep my little zipper shut because I don't wanna say too much. So first up, we might go over how Strills has a super volcano. This super volcano is located right around where that blue is around it. It's massive. It's connected to a tiny little mountain range. And this super volcano is very, very deadly. If it were to erupt, that it would change the entire course of Compolis a lot too, just like how the meteor hit. So hopefully that thing does not erupt. And also a little cool little fun fact, Tink has one of the largest mountains ever, Mount Cora, which is bigger than Mount Everest. Thought I could just say something like that. So let's get into the video, shall we? Yeah, we better do that. So basically, the temperate forests on top of Tungulus. During the summertime, they are a warm, very hot, pleasant forest. However, kind of like Earth, they start to cool and cool and they can get very cold, like start to have ice and snow, which means cold-blooded creatures usually have to hibernate or migrate in order to escape the winter and then come back. And here is the temperate wolfamillion. The temperate wolfamillion is a kind of strange creature. Now, they look more mammalian looking, but they are still reptiles and are cold-blooded. And they have, well, they're not really cold-blooded per se. Well, they still are, but they can go warm-blooded for a little bit in order to survive the cold for a bit. They can survive in the snow way longer than any other reptile. Maybe that leads to something else. Well, another really interesting fact about these, about the temperate wolfamillions, is that they have one of the strangest sort of migrational things. So basically, after they get done hibernating, they will usually probably get a snack for the road, and they will hit the road. Basically, they'll migrate from the temperate forests of Tungulus to the jungles, and then all the way to Strills. And basically, they just kind of stay in Strills for the entire summer, eating things. And then once it gets around the fall area, they'll migrate back up north. And usually the time they get there is starting to freeze over. They hibernate, yes. And then it repeats the cycle. It is really unknown why they do such a thing, but they still do it. And also, they hunt in their little opportunistic gangs and such. A very interesting creature. But if you were to look up into the trees, like oak trees, for example, mainly oak trees, you can find some interesting stuff, to say the least. Mainly invertebrates. Let's get on. So this is the centicaterpillar. Now, centicaterpillars are like a centipede caterpillar kind of creature. Now, they are a descendant of the gigapillar. They are also very large in size due to higher oxygen, and also they don't have any predators. Basically, on their back, they have a false head, kind of like a centipede. They use this false head in order to trick creatures. And once the creatures grab onto the head, because usually creatures aim for the head to deliver a kill as fast as possible, they will get stung by the stingers on the back, and then get bit by the main head. Usually, now, these heads are omnivorous, which means that you're going to eat your meat. I'm not saying that ever again, but they're also going to eat plants too, as well as meat. But they have a main problem with their a kind of survival-ish thing. So basically, this is a mimic pillar. Now, a mimic pillar, they like to mimic the tail bit of the centipillar. Now, they do this in order, because some creatures are intelligent. They are starting to understand that the head on the tail is not an actually head. And they pretend like they're the back end of the centipillar, so creatures will not go for it, and you'll usually leave it alone. They don't have stingers either, so they're pretty harmless. They're herbivores and are also descendant of the gigapillar. Now, when a creature mimics something else, it's called defensive mimicry. They do this in order to survive. And even deeper into the canopy of the trees, you might find this. The raptor swift tern is a very deadly and clever insect. Now you might be wondering, what do I mean by this? Well, for starters, these are a descendant of the jungle swift tern, and they now live in temperate forests and live in mainly oak trees, but also large limber trees. Now, one thing I would like to say about the entirety of the swift tern species is of their mouth parts. See, their mouth parts are like that of a dragonfly, due to some sort of convergent evolution within their mouth parts. Now, basically, the Maxwell and the Laborium fused in together. All mouth parts basically fused together. And then the inner mandibles the inner mandibles turned into like a dragonfly mouth part inside, kind of like this image, and they can unfurl it in order to grab things. So when I draw swift terns, I don't draw the inner mouth piece. I always draw the claw piece that is basically like the like mouth shell that covers the main inner mouth. That's how these creatures work. They also have very colorful eyes, mainly for mating rituals. However, one thing that's pretty cool about these insects is that they have intelligence similar to many varieties of jumping spiders, if not even greater. These, kind of like jumping spiders, can perform simple calculations and different step backs in order to find the best way to catch their prey. It's very interesting. They can solve pretty good ways in order to. If you were to put even a fake prey, they will still use the same approach in order to find and execute that creature for them to gobble up, which can make them very intelligent. They have a long tail-like structure in order to help them balance. This insect is smarter than me, I'd say. They also use that horn-like large structured disc on their head. Males use that to brawl. Also, what's more interesting, many swift terns' legs are semi-sprawled. Their legs are more underneath their body, they act like kind of like cats. Very interesting, very interesting. Keep an eye on these smart grasshoppers. They might lead to something very interesting in the future. But this guy right here is a pretty bad way to attack, because the tree swift terns are pretty helpless against these creatures. This is the night flitter chameleon. The night flitter chameleon are nocturnal and hunt at night. They have a dark green color in order to blend in with the night sky, and they have speckles on their wing membrane in order to mimic the stars. Yeah, which can actually allow them to hide withinward pretty good. And most of the time, tree swift terns don't see them coming. The midnight flitter chameleons are egg thieves. The eggs of the tree swift terns, which kind of look very reptilian-like, they lay them in the trees, of course. And the midnight flitter chameleons use the pattern of their body, which looks like the starry night sky, in order to attack the eggs, grabbing them with their talon-like feet, bringing them far away. And let's just say the tree swift terns don't seem to appreciate that at all, which can make these creatures very pretty intelligent, and they are basically menaces among the tree swift terns. Something you might want to look out for when you go to these creatures. So this can make these guys pretty dangerous. Well, we're tree swift terns. Now we're gonna go over back to strokes. Now, one thing I'd like to specify is that the jungle tropical forests are not even really like forests at all. Strills does not get as much rainfall. Basically, Strills is like Africa, in a sense, and its jungles are not as compact, so they're more like open-air plains. However, they have massive forests when they do have it. And one creature that is pretty unique that you can find here is well, I don't know. It's this guy. Why did I say I don't know? Because it's been a long day. This is the tailed junglefowl. Now, the tailed junglefowl is a pretty pudgy, almost Angry Birds-like build, and they have a long tail. They use this tail for communication. It's not even a tail, really. It's just woven feathers the tongue twister, weaving feathers into a one long tail. And they use that for communication. Roosters, of course, have a longer tail. Now, what's interesting more about these, they have intelligence similar to that of a parrot. Yes, intelligence similar to that of a parrot. But what's interesting about them is that they have mimicking skills. They are able to mimic things with great accuracy, kind of like a lyrebird in a way. So yeah, they have mimicking skills like that of a lyrebird. They mimic things in order to be like more intimidating for predators, and also to attract more creatures to them because they are very curious. So these tiny pudgy little birds are kind of cute and very expert mimickers. However, if you make them aggravated, they can have quite the temper on them. Now, it's time for these guys. Let's just say it's a very stinky situation with these guys. This is the stink chameleon, which is basically a mix of a chameleon and everyone's favorite little guy that you can find in your backyard if you are in a proper place. Skunks. Now, basically, these creatures have a tiny little stink sack that is full of smelly urine and other chemicals that smell terrible, and they spray it like a skunk in order to scare away predators, and it works very well. Now, something that is very interesting about these creatures is that they are actually descended from lemurmillions. They have made a new group of lemurmillions known as the ground-dwelling lemurmillions, which is basically lemurmillions that are on the ground. And that can be kind of cool, and it will be cool later in this episode if you find stuff like that. Cool. Why did I say cool? Just, okay. So, yeah, the ground-dwelling lemurmillions are going to be covered more and more in this episode. Well, only one more. Yeah. Y'all probably already know what it is. Sorry that I sound so down today. I'm burning up. It's too hot. But now we have this guy. This right here is the Grounger pictus. The Grounger pictus is basically like a mix of an alligator, the way it attacks. It attacks like an alligator or crocodile by lunging out of large bodies of water, snatching up its prey, and dragging them back down, usually drowning them and killing them, which makes them like a mix of an alligator, a catfish, and like a salamander. Now, unlike almost all pictus catfish, they do not have gills, they have lungs. So they can breathe air. However, they have amphibious-like skin, so they have to keep their skin nice and wet so they can come up on land and not dry out, extra crispy in the hot sun. So you can mainly find them in lakes and rivers, primarily where they're going to live. Now, we already know about how animals can work together. Let's just say, for example, wolves and crows. Now, the Grounger pictus works with their own species, the water deramillion. Now, the water deramillion and the Grounger pictus, they are best buddies with a kind of social gimmick. So basically, water deramillion, of course, are a descendant of deramillion. Now, they are kind of like vampire deer, take away the vampire tusks, and a chameleon, because they're semi-aquatic. However, their ass is really skittish like a deer, but exhibit a niche similar to that of a hippo. They use their large beak in order to crush any sort of something that they need to get to, like large seeds, but they're mainly feeding on algae and seagrass. They'll come up on land, however, to graze on grass. They don't have the long tongue that chameleons usually have anymore. Now, their nostrils are exhibiting on top of their head like a blowhole. Basically, they work together with the Grounder pictus. The Grounder pictus does not eat the water dairymelon. It lets them keep around, and it doesn't even eat their eggs or babies. And in return for that, they also provide protection from predators. The Grounder pictus provides protection. And in return, the water dairymelon are like a big snitcher. They will squawk and even grab and throw potential prey, like the, tailed jungle fowls, into the water, which kind of makes them pretty big snitches, which can result into a big friendship between these two species. Maybe this friendship might go farther in the future. Just saying. So yeah, it's very cool to see these creatures. But now exhibiting up into the trees, mainly trees like rubber trees and gimbalimba trees, you can find another variety of the walking pictus. This is the tree pictus. The tree pictus is like a mix of a tree frog, catfish, and like a gecko. Listen to their delicate calls, which can definitely be attributed to the frog. Listen. Pretty interesting calls they have there. They have them calls at night in order to attract mates or to scare away potential rivals of the same species. Now, unlike their cousins down in the swamps below, the Grounder pictuses, they do not have amphibious-like skin. They have scales like that of a lizard and can retain the water. They also have lungs. And they can jump from tree to tree, and they eat things like Compaulus locusts and also caterpillars, which can make them good to the environment, I guess, because an overpopulation of caterpillars can reduce many plant life, which makes them good. They also have kind of amphibious-like eyes, so they can see behind them if potential threats are. They're basically a lizard fish that lives in the trees. Very interesting. Also, kind of like geckos, they have the same little hairs on their tips of finger toes, which can allow them to stick to surfaces. They also are kind of like house geckos, and you can find them in tiny little groups. They're kind of cute. And maybe some in the future, I don't know, maybe some in the future could become warm-blooded. Which, if you ask me, could maybe even lead into some mammal-like creatures in the future. Who knows? And now, rummaging through the grass and underground, this is the molefowl. Now, this by far, in my opinion, has one of the most weirdest evolutionary lines from any other creature. Like, they're the descendant from the creature that you will more than likely not expect. These creatures are descendant from, you'll never believe me, raptor fowls. That's right, these tiny, cute, little omnivorous burrowers are descendant from a dromaeosaur-like bird that lives in jungle forests on Kamara. Now, the ones on Strills began to dig in order to build their nests. They then learned that using their wings in order to dig can make burrows a lot faster. So eventually their wings developed into hands. Some migrated outward, but some continued to dig ward, and thus became tiny little mole creatures. Some creatures on Earth have developed into mole-like creatures, and so have these guys. They have developed into mole-like creatures. And they mainly feed on bugs like worms and isopods, but will also feed on carrion and grass and roots of plants. They're kind of cute when you think about it. And their roosters make little calls too. Take a listen. So yeah, even the roosters make their tiny little crawls. They also don't have the combs either, like a traditional bird, chicken. How do they tell each other from apart? Well, it's their beaks. Their beaks have different shapes that each one of a flock can identify. I mean, that's pretty interesting. Yep, pretty interesting. Now we're going to move over to another part. And that part is going to be back to the water, where we find a new type of plant. This is the water milkweed. Now, water milkweeds are beautiful. They develop their roots into the mud and sand down below, and expand their lily pad-like leaves from outward, and expand their broad petals in order to attract pollinators. Other butterflies can pollinate them, but they're mainly after one specific type that will pollinate them. And that is the V-wing butterfly. Now, V-wing butterflies get their name from the strange pattern that resembles a V. They're also nicknamed Y butterflies because sometimes it can look like a Y. It can either look like a Y or a V. Now, these are kind of like mosquitoes. More like male mosquitoes, as male mosquitoes mainly drink nectar and stuff. But what I mean by mosquito is that they have a similar life cycle to a mosquito. They lay their eggs on like the roots of the water milkweed or even on water lilies, which then hatch into their caterpillars. Their caterpillars have tiny little fin-like legs that help them swim, and they can also wiggle their tails like mosquito larvae, allowing them to breathe. However, they're a lot more friendly and more delicate than mosquito larvae. They feed on algae and decaying matter that they can find down here. Then they crawl out of the water, then make their cocoon, and then emerge as a V-wing or Y-wing butterfly. And then the cycle repeats, and you got one type of strange life cycle butterfly. Pretty cool. Now, we're going to move over to another place. The coral reefs. The coral reefs are full of delicate, beautiful coral, which is very pretty. And just like on Earth, it can house various and varieties of fish. Speaking of which, what are some? This is, let's just say, the apex predator of the coral reefs. This is an ocean pictus king. Now, ocean pictus kings, or queens, because males are called kings, females are called queens. Basically, the reason they get that name is because of the crest of scales on their head. And they're called, well, ocean because they live in the ocean, and pictus because they're pictus. So basically, these guys are predators and have one of the most interesting methods of hunting. See, they have tiny little sockets on the base around their head. This socket basically closes and kind of creates an airtight seal, creating a trap that is no water and no oxygen, and it's waiting to be just sucked up, kind of like types of aquatic carnivorous plants. Basically, the trap is set. Or no, it fills up with water. My bad. It fills up with water, and it's getting ready to do something very interesting. So basically, once it is chasing a prey, once it gets close enough to the prey, it, boom, releases great blasts and explosions of water from the poor scales. These can jet out in front of its face and on the side. It blasts water, which can cause creatures to be blasted, and usually when they blast, they get disoriented and may even get knocked out against rocks or something, which then can allow them to get eaten by a very terrifying fish, which is not a pleasant way to go. They use their large beaks in order to crush bone scales. But despite their pretty gruesome nature of hunting, they're actually quite intelligent. See, they have intelligence similar to that of a manta ray. They will collect beautiful corals and rocks in order to decorate parts of their territory, and they will expand their territory. If they hit another ocean pictus king's territory, they won't attack each other. Instead, they might live with each other in different territories, and they basically just expand out territories in order for hunting. They'll exhibit new territories, and they might even spread across the ocean. Also, here is the male variants. Once they reach sexual maturity, they grow the same kind of red stripes, and their crown gets bigger and even develops jewels, like scales, which can be pretty cool. Now, this creature is a ocean crocodilian. Now, an ocean crocodilian is a descendant of the, crocodilian that have become semi-aquatic as they come on land to lay their eggs like sea turtles. Basically, they're just a crocodilian that lives in the ocean. They mainly feed on crustaceans and maybe even the tiny, larva of ocean pictus kings. Who knows? Which can be cool. However, they're not the biggest. They're definitely not the biggest of the bunch, which means even fully grown adults of the ocean crocodilians can be eaten by ocean pictus kings. As you'll find out later at the end of the video, ocean pictus kings are absolutely giants. So, it's not the best life for an ocean crocodilian, but it probably will get better. They are actually not hunted much by ocean pictus kings. Ocean pictus kings primarily hunt invertebrates like bug-faced lobsters and other things. Now, this specific part of Strills that I am circling here, this part of Strills is a very important part. It's called the Golden Sand Reef. The Golden Sand Reef is very beautiful. Basically, its sand has special minerals in it that make the sand way more golden. It's a very beautiful place, one of the most beautiful places on Campolis. And one of them creatures makes its home here. This is the golden lobster. Now, of course, these lobsters have a form which can make them blue, but it's not the best because predators might be able to find them, even though they don't really have predators. So, most blue variants get killed, though, by predators. Like, sometimes ocean pictus kings will migrate here and eat them. So, their gold appearance mainly helps them. Now, these invertebrates are kind of like fiddler crabs, except fiddler crabs, they are not like fiddler crabs with their claw, but instead are like how they feed. That's a tongue twister, seriously. The fiddler crabs gulp up sand and filter out all the microscopic life within and spit it out into these tiny little balls of sand. Now, they do the same. They pick it up with their mouth and shoveling claws. Their tails, however, are only used for digging and for domination displays. For a predator or rival were to get in their territory, they can raise their tail. They do not swim, which is kind of weird as their ancestor is a sea royal. Kind of strange how they went from pretty dangerous predators to these guys. But they're pretty uncommon to find just out in the open, which is why some people call them the legendary golden lobster, because mainly they can be found just burrowing through. And then we have this guy, the golden snail. Now, the reason they're called golden snails is because they live in the golden reef, but they're not golden. It's kind of strange. Now, these saltwater snails are also another evolutionary line of snails. And they can actually leave the water. They can leave the water, and they leave the water for two reasons. One, maybe there's food up there. Some creatures die and wash up on shore. They'll go up there and eat. They can hold water in their skin and gills for a long time, which can allow them to survive. I don't know why I said gills. Which, as depicted here, this blue Silamillion got killed by something bigger, foreshadowing, and he washed up on shore, sadly. And, this inquisitive stink chameleon was attempting to scavenge, but it seems like he is not the first one to get here. They also go on land to lay their eggs. They lay their eggs in pockets of water, like tide pools, and kind of like sea turtles, except sea turtles do not lay their eggs in tide pools. They mainly lay it underneath the sand. The reason they do this is because, basically, I don't know why I did that. Basically, these guys do not want these golden lobsters to eat their eggs. They suck them up in the sand, filter them out, eat them. Their species can die. They don't really attack either. They don't have really special ways to attack either. And so they're just here to eat their algae and stuff and scavenge off of food. They cannot really defend themselves in an attack. So that's why they lay their eggs on top of like tide pools. So the golden lobsters cannot eat them. That's the only reason why. And other creatures more than likely will not see that as food. But golden lobsters definitely will. Now, I guess you got a sneak peek of this image, but we're gonna go through the freshwater environments, mainly rivers and lakes. The rivers can be quite big, like Amazon and the Florida Everglades. That's how rivers can get up in here in Campolis. And these little guys are trollo lobsters. Now, trollo lobsters are descendant from lobsters that were bottom feeders. Basically, now they're freshwater, and they feed off of algae in marine snow. That's primarily all they're doing. They're kind of like trilobites, and they just scuttle about, cleaning up. Most creatures do not harm them, as they are the cleanup crew. Besides the freshwater snails, they are the cleanup crew. Nothing else is to really say about them, except they're just the cleanup crew. Trilobite lobsters that live in freshwater. That's all I gotta really say about them. Which, yeah, they're like trilobites. As you can see, like, the distinct head shape, these guys also have that distinct head shape, kind of like a trilobite. Which, yeah, they're like trilobites. These guys, however, are definitely not like trilobites. This is the dolphin chameleon. Now, the dolphin chameleon, well, hence its name, has intelligence similar to that of a dolphin. Now, what's interesting about these creatures, well, they're primarily omnivores, feeding on algae and, kelp and other things, and also meat. Definitely meat. They have a strong bite force, but they're also very intelligent. One of the most intelligent creatures on Campolis, as they are as smart as a dolphin, which dolphins are pretty smart. Now, a cool interesting fact about these guys and the upcoming bird, the elephals, these creatures have become friends in many cases. They've become friends in order to help each other, which is very interesting. Maybe someday the elephals might do something with these guys, or these guys might reach sapiens. Now we move over to another spot. The caves and ravines on Tungulus. They have grown larger. They're basically large ravines, kind of like the ones you see in Minecraft. They also have various tunnels and deep, like, canyons. It's very interesting. And it can be very scary down there. Very scary. Ooh, you might find the boogeyman down there. It's creepy. And some other creatures that are also creepy live there. So, let's go ahead and dive right in. So this is a cave hopper. Now, cave hoppers kind of resemble a cricket, basically. They have eyes. Now, these guys mainly live on spots of the cave that, like, have light that can peer through them so they can detect it and eat, like, stuff. They eat moss and fungus, but they also eat dead organic material. Now, these guys are actually related to mango hoppers, the ones that were so old ago. Their eyes can only detect light frequencies, not any other shape or anything. Now, since their eyes can only detect light, some will use bioluminescence inside their antennae in order to communicate and attract others. And if they want to communicate from far away, they will use their legs and chirp. And they will chirp to attract each other, developing a somewhat beautiful song throughout these desolate, echoing caves. However, they have a predator, and that predator is none other than the cave fowl. Now, this is by far a really weird-looking bird. Very weird looking bird. They look like a mix of them death angels from The Quiet Place and like a clicker from The Last of Us. They have incredible discs of which comes from their comb. They also come from these guys. Mole fowls, before they became smaller, migrated off to the caves and tunnels and became these scary little predators. They are an offshoot of the mole fowl. They have definitely retained their carnivorous diet of the raptor fowls and have developed strong serrated beaks, allowing them to eat. Their combs, of course, have developed into echolocation discs. They use a primitive form of echolocation in order to find prey and map their environment. Here's a recording of some. They use the clicking in order to find prey, like cave hoppers. And when they're not using echolocation, they make squawks and chirps in order to communicate with others of their flock. Take a listen to this. Now, of course, every single chicken, bird inside of Compolis crows. So, of course, these guys have to crow too. Take a listen. Now, they only crow in order to establish another male that this is their flock, not his, and they will fight over it. And basically, these poor cave hoppers are not safe from these deadly predators. Very not safe. You see them claws on their forelimbs? That's what they use to tear through the carapace, and they use their strong beak in order to bite like a grizzly dinosaur. It's pretty scary. Now, slithering about through the tunnels, deeper inside the caves than these two, this creature right here is a cave chameleon. Now, cave chameleons, they're a descendant of these guys, the venomland. They still retain their venomous, however, their fangs have now become venomous, like incisors, so they can like bite and like venomize you. They also have a long tongue for ensnaring prey. They don't have as strong venom as the venomilians, but they still have a decent venom in order to take you down. Now, kind of like the third eye of many reptiles, which chameleons also have, their eyes have not completely gone away. Instead, they just kind of de-evolved into these primitive proto-eyes to detect light. They use this in order to detect light. Usually they're hunting for creatures like cave hoppers, or even when they're detecting light in order to help them find the warmth of the sun. And they return back to their inky depths in order to hunt. They soak in all the sunlight with their black skin scales so they can store energy within themselves to keep warm. Very interesting reptiles indeed. Now this is the giant rotund tunnel lobster. Now these tunnel lobsters are also blind. They don't need eyes. Instead, they use their antennae in order to hunt. Their antennae can jet out and grab creatures at the edge of their tunnel. Now, what's interesting about the females, mainly the females of the species, the females fuse their bodies within their tunnel, and they wait until prey approaches. The males, however, are like their little workers. They bring them food and will also somewhat mate with them whenever they want. And when the female gets pregnant, she can exert water into like a little puddle in order to lay her eggs, using her back legs in order to filter out the water so no harmful bacteria can get in there. And then when the babies first hatch, they become filter feeders. And then once they have the turn, they will leave and go find water, like rivers. And once they do that, they will eventually turn into these lovely, lovely giant invertebrates. They can definitely prove scary. Now we travel to another part. That is the savannah, and these guys right here are pretty cool. This is the scythe-tailed chameleon. Now the scythe-tailed chameleon, hence its name, has a long scythe-like appendage on its tail made out of bone that it uses to stab into rivals and potential threats. Now, it's not just their really cool looking tail that can scare off potential threats. These guys have blue crystals within their scales. Now, chameleons only become red because they puff up full of blood and stuff. Now, when blood goes into these little blue crystals and such, they become purple. Yes, that's right. They don't become red when they get mad. They become purple. Now, the skin that covers the bone like scythe, the thin, very thin layer, does not have them crystals, so it also pops up red. So, you got mad purple chameleons. They're nicknamed purple millions, too. Now, what's interesting about these guys is that during breeding season, if there are two males, the females will have the two males fight. The males will stab each other and bite each other with their tails and their long teeth. And whenever a male is giving up, just to make sure that the male does not get up and attack him again while he is mating with the female, the man will do some, man breeding. Yep, and basically they do that in order to make sure that, hey, I'm the one that's dominant here. And usually when that happens, the other male that lost is going to run away and find his luck elsewhere. And then he gets to breed with the female. Very interesting way of finding mates. They have long tongues in order to snatch up Compolus locus and other small insects that they might find here. They also eat carrion. However, their purple color, while can be very intimidating for other creatures, cannot always save them sometimes. Sometimes the purple color very well cannot save them. So that purple color not always can protect you, as you can see here. Now, you might be wondering, what can it protect it from? And that is none other than this guy. This is the phalarope. Now, the reason they get their name phalarope is because of their kick. Their kick and, well, before we get into the kick, we'll talk about their looks and behavior. They behave and act and look probably more than like a terror bird, especially with their beak. And, well, when they get the roo part of their name, is a kangaroo, because kangaroos can kick with immense force. These guys can kick just as strong as a kangaroo. They can run up to 50 to 40 miles per hour, which is very fast for a creature on Compolus as of yet. They're basically the cheetahs of Compolus now, and they're very aggressive when it comes to eating. Once they are hungry, they will find a prey, like a scythe-tailed chameleon. Usually they'll kick it or stomp on it in order to finish the job, kill it, eat it, it's done. That's how quick they can do it. And also, they're more solo birds. They don't really exhibit pack or flock hunting. They mainly are solo birds. So hens will hunt by their lonesome, and males sometimes will group up together in order to hunt, but most of the time they're solo. Females will also do the same. Once a male breeds with a female, he'll stay with the female, and so will their beautiful chicks until they grow up and go out and hunt for their own food. Maybe this could read into some horror stories for elophiles. Uh-oh, said too much. Now, when you're walking through the savannas of Strill, you might find these giant Beluvium, almost like kingdom mounds of sand that can be about 18 feet tall. You might be wondering, what can make such a tall building that is some bigger than some people's houses? We'll leave it to one of the smallest creatures out here. These are the royal anthoppers. Now, the royal anthoppers basically look like knights. Let's go over many of the new forms to help out their colony. This is the worker. Workers collect sap from shrub trees. Now, these bugs will, of course, collect sap of shrub trees. They'll collect grasses. They'll collect carrion and other things in order to build up their hive. They'll help insulate and extend more tunnels and basically collect food. And when a queen dies, either an egg will hatch out into a new queen, or they will evolve into a new queen. Now we have the warrior. Warriors have a large thorny nose that they use to impale any other rival colonies. They are sent out with workers when collecting food just in case of another colony or predator attempts to attack them. They can use their sharp thorn face in order to stab them, in order to, well, scare them off and don't attack us. They are significantly larger than a worker. Then there's the drones. Drones are one of the smallest. They have a membrane between their antennae that can stretch out in order to protect the queen, kind of like a shield. Basically, they're also the only ones that are able to breed with the queen. And this time, instead of workers taking care of the eggs, the drones have to take care of the eggs and feed them food, which oftentimes involves vomiting. And then there is the giant tank queen herself. The queen is even well equipped too. She has spikes on her shell and carapace. And she also has a shield-like head in order to block from her abdomen to be touched. Because the abdomen, of course, holds all of the eggs. And if the eggs are destroyed and the queen is destroyed, the entire colony is also destroyed. So the queen is very important. And because of this, they build these monstrous towers in order to protect said queen. They can also have many queens, kind of like termites, and they do this in order to protect every single one of them queens, and eggs and nymphs and everything else. Make sure their colony is safe. However, they have one of the most scariest things that can attack them in these massive hives, which could be a group of the giant hive hopper chameleons. Yes, these guys, the giant hive hopper chameleons, unlike their cousins on Kamara, are giant. They have very similarities to that of an earth giant anteater, mainly with size, but also their terrifying claws that they use to break through the mounds. They use these big, long claws to break through the hard, rock-like shell of their hives, insert their long tongue, and lick up any of the nymphs, sap, or any other unlucky royal hive hopper that gets in their way. They are menaces, and they have a large, bony crest, so they can display. That would be a nightmare for a royal hive hopper. Now, back then when I was talking about the stink chameleon, I said more ground-dwelling lemurmillions. And this is a ground-dwelling lemurmillion, known as a strillamillion. Now, what's interesting about strillamillion is that they're also very intelligent. They're about as intelligent as a crow. They also have a similar skunky-like sack, so they can spray. Also, just like these guys, they can have a spray. Another really interesting fact about them is that they have really, really manipulative hands. Their hands are very manipulative, like manipulating simple tools like rocks. They pick out the smoothest, most shiny rock that they can find, kind of like a trading, bartering system. Though they are as intelligent as crows and have a similar behavior to the dog, well, loyalty is similar to a dog. Why would they have loyalty of a dog? Well, this is because they are pets. Domesticated, intelligent pets of none other than the elephant. Yes, this is it. The elephant. The smortboard. The sapient tyrant fowl. These guys are sapient. Sapience has finally arrived on Campolis after a couple millions of years. Didn't take very long. These guys are as smart as an early man and even developed an early religion. This is going to be the earliest religion known on Campolis' history. Now, let's just hurry up and get over some things about them. So kind of like how we have Uncanny Valley, they also have Uncanny Valley. If one is slightly off from another, they will get freaked out by it. Like, you are not the same as me. So they'll get scared. Very scared. Also, well, females, kind of like various types of marsupials, they have a pouch that can carry up to 2 eggs. This is where they put their eggs after they lay them. Because something interesting about an elephant is that they are non-stop moving. They can travel all throughout parts of Strills and Tungulus. They never stop moving, which can tie into what we're going to talk about later. So they have eggs in their pouches. Chicks are about the size of a normal rooster and are very playful and very curious. Roosters, there are usually 2 main roosters within a flock. The breeding rooster, which is usually the dominant rooster that breeds with everybody, they're about 8 feet tall, while the smaller rooster is only about 6 to 5 feet tall, which can be about as tall as the tallest man ever. They also have very sharp hook-like spurs and a deadly kick. All elophiles have a beak similar to a demon duck, which is used for them to crush large seeds and plants and grasses and tubers. Also, last time I was going to have the elophiles have very human-like expressions, but that might not be as realistic as I used to think. So they're going to have expressions very similar to a human, but not too close. So this is a neutral face of a elephant. This is usually a face when they're just moving. They almost have a little smirk, but that's just how their facial structure is shaped. When they are happy, they push up their eyelids to symbolize that they're happy, to show that, well, I'm happy, go get me a sandwich. When they are angry, their comb puffs up, and they get very angry looking. They puff up their feathers to make sure that you understand that they are angry. Grrr. When they are scared, their eyelids can get very strange and their pupils get very large. They also begin to frown. Usually, this happens when they're being attacked by predators. When they are sad, their skin flaps turn down, as well as their feathers turn down. Now, humans have a system known as the baby effect. The baby effect is where we can find creatures that are not even humans somewhat cute. Like this is why we find creatures that have large heads, big eyes, and usually plump bodies cute. Now, they will of course find their plump, usually large eyes, broader-faced chicks cute, of course, because it's their own young. Other creatures that they might find cute are these guys, the tailed jungle fowls, because of their plump body and large eyes. They might also find the tree pictus cute due to their large eyes and somewhat plump body. They will also more than likely find baby strilomillions cute due to their bulky eyes and pudgy build, which, of course, they're going to find pretty cute in their eyes. Also, they can move their wings. This is usually a traditional wing position around their side body. They can lift it downward in order to manipulate objects. They mainly use their mouth to manipulate objects, but they can also use their wings to do so. And they can also raise it up high. Also, early humans made cave paintings, but these birds also make paintings. They mainly make paintings on large boulders across the valleys and such. They make these paintings in order to tell any other flocks or herds that might come by what is up ahead and what you can find there. Here's a couple of them. Basically, that's what I just said. They move through. Once they look, basically, they'll understand what's up ahead, if somebody died, or anything else, which can make the elophiles very intelligent birds. And they believe that the star is indeed their god. They believe that the sun is the god, and they created everything on Campolis. Maybe it has some truth. It created everything on Campolis. All life comes from this beautiful star, which they believe is their god. They believe that the moon is the goddess, basically the wife of this god, and they believe that the darkness surrounding the night sky is, the moon, the goddess. The darkness surrounding the sky is an evil darkness called the Kokorla. And they believe that the stars is where the souls of the rest are sent to sleep and watch over the creation of their God for all of eternity. And that's why they need to follow, that's why they don't eat meat, basically. They believe that eating their God's creations is a sin. And you will be very much so kicked out of the flock if you do it unless you are completely starved. And during spring, you are allowed to eat meat. It's a holiday known as Kulala. And you can eat meat on that holiday because all the other animals are bred. They have nothing else in life. They can eat them. So that's why they can only eat meat on that holiday. So yeah, as you can see, this guy right here, he's taking this holiday very well. So yeah, that's pretty much the entirety of the Alophiles. Now, kind of like us, we have mythological beings. This is one of them. This is the Corolores. A sighting of the Corolores was documented in the Golden Reef. There's only a couple sightings, and they believe that this is magical sea being. They believe that this being is what helped create the ocean and what helped flourish its life. They believe it's like a golden bird with large, beautiful combs. But in reality, this is just a misrepresentation sighting of a golden lobster. But they still believe that these guys exist, and they have not yet figured out that that's just a lobster. Another creature that they call are the Dartwits. The Dartwits are basically their demons. They're the ones that take your soul. If you committed too many sins, you'll be taken to the underworld and become part of the darkness, where you will be tortured for all of eternity by these evil beings that look very close to a normal Alophile. However, they are evil and demons. And they have another mythological creature that is like a guide. This is the Guidler. The Guidler helps guide you to your specific spot in the night sky, where you'll become one of the specks out there to watch over their creation and live for eternity and have whatever you desire. It's a very beautiful, touching sentiment. Maybe this is why they love their Strilomillions so much. So, the Alophiles, we'll go over more of the Alophiles in episode 10, way more. Maybe even cover other little stories. But that's pretty much it for today. Here's the size comparison of all the creatures mentioned today. I told you that Ocean Pictus King was going to be large. And basically, thank you so much for watching. This is the longest episode of Compolus to date, an hour long. So, I hope you have a good day. Be sure to like and subscribe, and don't worry, these sapient birds will come back soon. Thank you so much for watching, and have an awesome day. Thank y'all all guys so much.